Okay, I mean, this is also indicative, actually, something that we've been trying to do for the 4 years now, is that give the opportunity for all of you to talk and network and exchange ideas and so forth. And as you see, still half of the people are actually there doing that, which is great. But trust me, we will have plenty of opportunity after this panel to actually spend more time discussing with ourselves, and actually we will have even better snacks after that. So, okay, so we can start now. I think we will try to get more people coming in, but today, actually, in this panel, what we thought that we'll discuss today is that something that is very relevant, and we wanted to make it very interactive. So, what is going to happen is that I will have a few questions for our panelists, but then I will open it to all of you to discuss, the topic of the day. And the topic is actually how artificial intelligence and AI is in higher education, how it changes, and how is AI being used in higher education, and what is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And hopefully our very lively panel here will discuss some of these things. I didn't give them any particular questions, so we can get them unprepared. So I told them that basically, depending on their answers, so we may want to do we may ask them something really, really hard. Without, I'm not going to introduce them because they're going to introduce themselves. And we're starting with the first kind of question and opening, if you will, not necessarily remarks, but from everyone to tell us a little bit about who they are, what they do at the University of Miami. That's an easy question, right? That's a softball. And then how they have been using, from their experience, AI, whether this is in the classroom or in their research. Initially, to give us a little bit of an idea of how they have used that. And I will start, actually, I will pick someone. Normally, I won't go in order, so I will pick Ben first. Ben?
Unscripted. Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Lauren. I'm the chair of the Department of Writing Studies. I'm also director of a program called Innovation in Society, and I have a secondary appointment in the Department of Interactive Media. So, AI. What am I doing with it? What are my students doing with it? I teach a lot of design classes. I teach a lot of stuff that's like human-oriented. So, I'm helping students try to solve big problems using design thinking and futures design and things like that. It requires a lot of critical thinking. I also I teach writing on occasion too, as per my department chair role. One of the challenges of doing that work is working in teams. And so I asked a pretty simple question during the beginning of my last design thinking class, which is, can teams of students partner with AI, and do they feel that it makes them more creative if they do? And so we studied that over the course of the semester. I could tell you more about the study, but the answer is sometimes. It does. Students do think it makes them more creative, and sometimes it doesn't. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that research if we want. I have to say this, I'm an administrator with a lot of administrative hats, and I use AI all the time to support that work, and sometimes it fails me. And so part of my job as somebody who's engaging with AI is to look at it and be like, not that, but maybe more of that. Not that, but maybe more of that. And so that sort of human control over its output is essential to all the work I do. And so that's partially what I'm bringing into the classroom to talk with students about.
Great. So, Wanli?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wanli Xing. I'm a professor of teaching and learning in the School of Education and Human Development. I'm also a core faculty in the iDisc. I was the informatics for education endowed associate professor at the University of Florida. So this is really my first semester, very exciting. And in terms like my research or like relationship with AI, I think broadly about like 3 areas. First, I create a lot of like AI-powered technologies or tools for like K-16 students, not only like in higher ed, but also interacting a lot with like K-12 students and the school districts, parents and teachers, administrators. Second part, we used a lot of like, AI tools to do like, pass through a lot of like big data in education field and try to advance the fundamental understanding of teaching and learning processes and try to optimize, what are the best teaching and learning strategies for the K-16 students. And the last one is focusing more like on future workforce development, particularly for like AI and advanced technologies. So overall, like, from both work, life, and the research perspective, AI is essentially a part of my daily work and life, I guess. Yeah.
Great. So, Mary Beth?
Hi, my name is Mary Beth Arcodia. I am an assistant professor at the Rosenstiel School Department of Atmospheric Science, and I'm also a core IDISC faculty member. I describe myself as a climate scientist who uses machine learning and not the other way around. And so that being said, I utilize AI-based tools to learn about the climate system. And this was pretty consistent up until about 3 or 4 months ago, where we build machine learning models, typically neural networks, and we utilize environmental data, so this can be observations, climate model data, to extract signal from a really noisy climate system, ultimately to better improve our predictions. And so by really understanding the nuances of these tools, we're able to quantify confidence in our predictions, better communicate these things, and ultimately improve our weather and climate forecasts. That being said, my use of generative AI was predominantly as a coding helper, things like that. But more recently, especially with the latest developments and some work by my postdoc, Shirei Chen, we've been looking more at these capabilities of using it as a brainstorming research companion. But this is very new, and so we're very much in the new stages of what it can do, what it can't do, where it's helpful, these types of things in terms of still building machine learning models for climate science questions, and then also using some of these newer capabilities.
And Clay, last but not least.
I'm Clay Ewing. I teach in interactive media. I'm a designer, and my focus is game design for social impact. Okay, how do I use AI? I use it a lot. I use it a ton. I think most importantly, I use it for reflective design, and I do like a Socratic kind of thing with ChatGPT is really good at that. So kind of like questioning myself, like it's like talking to myself, but with like the mirror of me having an internet brain, and exploring design ideas. I also use it as a coder, and I've switched over to Claude for that because Claude seems to be better on most days for coding. So in the classroom, I'm part evangelist and part skeptic, I guess. And I'm really interested in seeing how students are using it and how I can teach them from my own failings and also like the other way around. So one, like just like a hard example, right, is I found ChatGPT is really good at taking the rules of a game and turning it into a dashboard. So not like so if you're making a board game, right? You could prototype all the stuff and try to balance it. Normally we'd use spreadsheets, but I tried this with one of my games, and I was like, wow, that worked really well because it created this dashboard where everything was like fully there, and I could balance it, and it really was like a digital prototype that I could use for prototyping and testing. And then I tried it. I was like, maybe my rules are just like really well written. So then I tried using it with my students, and I was like, hey, write a rule set. Okay, now feed that into AI and get the dashboard. And it worked really well. But that was like that one use, which I think the trick of it is like, I think we often look at generative AI like a lot of people look at Google. Like, if you started with Google, you were doing Boolean searches, right, and trying to like talk machine in order to get Google to spit out what you want. But then we have autocomplete where it's like, what are the best restaurants in Miami, right? Top 10 restaurants, and then it's like giving us that list. And we're treating Gen AI more like that, asking it these just like natural language questions, which is good because it works that way. But on the other hand, it dumbs us down a lot if we're not willing to engage with the output that it gives us. And so I think that's something that I'm kind of seeing and trying to push back and trying to teach students to think critically about the output.
Great. So now, actually, we heard a little bit about how each of our panelists is using AI, and touched a little bit of how they are using it in a classroom setting. But I want to actually follow it up with the question: is that how your students use it, and most importantly, how you think your teaching has evolved or not with the use of AI. And I will go to Wan Lee first now, because I know that he's doing this, and he's deploying AI, specific AI for learning math in high schoolers here in Miami-Dade and all over the state of Florida. He's got currently 60,000 students doing that. So can you give us a little bit of experience how you actually came up with to use these kind of techniques, if you will, to teach something as boring, as incredibly interesting and stimulating math to high schoolers, and how and what is the feedback that you get?
Yeah, I think, overall, because, there's a whole society called like International Society of Artificial Intelligence in Education. It has been around about 30 years. But for the past 20 years also, we didn't move much. And even for after 2011, there's a huge movement around data science, big data, right? There's a little bit more movement and dynamic in the AIED society. But the problem is, all the agent, all the AI system you're creating to support education, whether it's K-12 or a university setting, it's still very rigid. Essentially, the AI a lot of times are too confined. A lot of times are rule-based. So the scenario you can create, or the simulation you can create it, it's students can easily get bored with it because it's so confined. But after the ChatGPT or the generative AI emerged, we see it significantly almost revolutionized the whole AIED field. And also there are a lot of questions, ethics, from technical perspective, from ethical perspective, a lot of discussions. But I can talk about that forever. But speaking specifically about the project that we are trying to bring to the students, how can we make it more engaging? How can we make it more less interactive? I think the key thing is we move beyond. First thing is just a chatbot, right? Because the dominant approach, of course you can do coding, right? But still the dominant approach interacting with the AI is still a text, right? You type in, you get an answer. So that's more the common or dominant approach for the current AIED field, or the AI applications in education in general, right? So what we are trying to do is trying to enable, first thing is multimodal interaction with AIs. Right, so it goes beyond just texting. So they can use a gesture, they can use a voice, they can use a sound. So we're trying to diversify the interaction modalities with the AI. That's first thing. Second thing is more from a fundamental teaching and learning perspective, or learning science, or theoretical perspective. The concept that we are trying to push is a weak large language models, or weak generative AI. What does that mean, right? The dominant approach, I think almost for everyone nowadays, whether used for work or teaching and learning, is we seek advice from AI, right? AI knows everything. We need their support and help, right? But education in general is not like an information transmission. I'm asking a question, I get an answer. We don't think that's the good way to learn. So actually in learning science, from learning science perspective, a very interesting approach, a very effective approach from like 1,000 like review studies and meta-analysis, the effect size of learning by teaching is quite high. So we can kind of like flip the role of like, large language model or like generative AI with the student. So the student become like, the expert. AI need to seek advice from the student. So we reverse this role for it. So this approach, we're trying to, beyond like a multimodal capability, we're also trying to like, using like a learning science fundamentals series to guide our design to better engage students. So students try to teach AI something, right? It can be like helper, it can be like, a cousin needs your help, or classmate needs your help. So we try different approaches, try to engage students. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, this is basically, I think this is fantastic. That this is the way that basically what Wan Li is saying, which is a new ways of actually how we integrate it into our education. And it's not really the static way of actually somebody's asking a question and you have an uber human or an Uber AI giving you the answers. So that's great. So Mary Beth, what are your experiences, with your students about AI? How you think that they are using it, or how you know they are using it, and how you think that you can evolve your teaching to incorporate or ban AI altogether, whatever you think that is the appropriate. So I'm not trying to to be actually, how can I say, an advocate for AI and so forth. I want actually for all of you to think about how you use it, and the answer is we don't use it at all, right? Because we don't think if that's the case, right? So please.
Yeah, so I actually am doing a little bit of both of what you said. So I'm currently teaching an undergrad environmental statistics course. So a very math-based course. And at the beginning of the semester, I had this plan that I was going to show a problem, do it on the board, and then show ChatGPT getting it wrong. As like, we can't rely on AI. I have not had a single problem that ChatGPT has gotten wrong, to use as an example. And I think that that's actually important in showing the development, because a year ago it would have been a lot easier to show that example. And so in that, and thinking about what this class is for, which is fundamental statistics to be used out in the field, I've actually moved away from coding almost entirely to do everything from the theoretical standpoint, because it's very simple to take the problem from the textbook, put it into your LLM of choice, and for it to completely spit it out. I don't need to teach that. And so instead, by in the classroom removing the access to a computer, handwriting the notes, I hope that there's that core theoretical piece, because the coding element is there. That being said, I do still do a little bit of coding, and mostly through tutorials that I wrote through Claude or Gemini, to go through to show the connection between an equation written on the board and how that actually translates to code, which I think can sometimes still be a disconnect. But it's not really a piece in the classroom, again, because of the class that I'm teaching. I did tell the students that I don't mind if they use it for their homeworks. I wasn't encouraging them, but I said that for your homework, you're able to use whatever resources you have available to you. To me, what cheating is that there's no understanding of what you're turning in the classroom. I think there's a lot of blurred lines, grayness that comes with AI, and I think there's a lot of ethics, morals, conversations I'm happy to engage in, and I think it's ever evolving. But where I see a very clear line in cheating is, do you understand what you wrote? And whether that information came from Google, came from ChatGPT, or came from you copying your friend's homework, I don't really see a difference there. So that's assessed through classwork problems, through exams where they don't have access to those things to be able to test that. That's at the undergrad level. At the graduate level, I'm developing a course, I haven't taught it yet, about using machine learning for marine, atmospheric, and earth science. Like I said, I'm at the Rosenstiel campus. And that's really teaching how a neural network works, how it can be used for your environmental problem. And a big piece of that class is removing the magic piece of machine learning and showing how it's a tool in the toolbox to be used. And so I really think it comes down to the content of the class, the goals and the objectives, the level of students that you're dealing with. I think as academics, we're so lucky to have this interface with students. And I asked them, what do they think is the role of learning statistics in the age of AI? I asked it through an anonymous survey that they didn't get credit for, so they had no incentive to lie to me. And a lot of them actually still said that they saw value in learning and using AI as an assistant. And I gotta say, that made me so happy, because I was having this crisis of, do we even need to teach these things anymore? And so, having these 18 to 22-year-olds convey this, at least in today's day and age, was really nice to hear.
Great. And I think, it was great what you just said, that you changed a little bit mid-course, your course. So it's great. Clay, can you give us a few experiences as well?
Yeah, I think, code is where it really shines for me in my coursework with design classes, because I think when you're thinking of creative code, it's not, is this the best code? It's, does it work? Can I show my idea? Can I express it? And so now, the bar has kind of been removed, right? So if you have a really good idea, you can just chase that idea completely. But it comes with technical deficits. So I could ship a game that was horribly coded by Claude, right? But it works. And nobody's going to know I like the game and it's cool. But what happens is, I'm making this game. I have an appetite, a curious appetite, right? Everything that James talked about in the keynote, having all of those things. If you have somebody that has all of those amped up, and they jump into Claude code and they're making a game, you can go off the rails really, really fast, because you're not cleaning up the mistakes that it's making, right? And the only way that you know that is to be technically proficient. So with my students, I'd put them in 3 camps. I'd say there's the evangelists that are this is awesome. I have I experimented with the Max, Claude Max, and whoa, it's amazing, and I'm creating all these apps, and this is awesome. And then I have on the polar opposite end, I do not like AI. It makes me sick. Just don't. Let's not. This is the death of humanity, right? And then I have the middle ground, and this tends to be, I think I've seen this most with computer science students that are taking games, which is I want to know how this works, so I'm gonna learn how to do this by myself, and then I'm gonna ask Claude for advice, and then but I'm not gonna walk up those stairs until I know that I know how to climb the stairs, which I think is the right way to do it.
I think, and Ben, so can give us a little bit about your experience as well, about how you use it in the classroom, how the students, more importantly, see it in the classroom.
Yeah, so I teach design thinking, and one of the things in design thinking classes that I try to bring a lot in are case studies. And so if a student is working through a case study, I will oftentimes, ask them to try to run simulations with the case study. And so that way they can imagine alternate kinds of futures and realities. And I do that to help them get to the point that by the time they've created something and they want to start testing it, they have built enough knowledge about case studies and context and what kinds of context is helpful. They've started training their teammate agent that I've asked them to create over the course of the semester. And then they start running simulations with the products that they've created or the solutions that they've created. What would happen if this future state was in play, or what would happen if this technological advancement occurred? So it's sort of like a way for them to imagine future realities and to say, well, if we went this direction and this, and then they can talk about the futures cone, for those of you who are really familiar with future studies, is this a probable reality? Is this plausible? And they start sort of turning to it to have conversations. And so it's actually not about the simulation at all. It's about something that they can talk about. Is this real? Is this something that we think is possible? And so we do a lot of speculative stuff like that. I've talked to students about it. They like this. We did this one activity called red teaming. If you're familiar with that, students loved it. It blew their mind. They were walking around going, wow, it gave me a 27-point list of things that where my solution was going to cause cybersecurity problems on multiple levels, and I hadn't thought of any of these. And they really loved it. They didn't know if it was true or not. That's a whole other conversation. The biggest thing they tell me is they're worried about it de-skilling them. That is the thing I hear over and over is, if I do this, will I be less valuable? And so it's an ongoing conversation. Again, I teach design thinking, so the way that I ask them to kind of engage in conversation about that is through structured debriefs, like 2 up, 2 down, type of activities, but also in sort of like ongoing short reflections as individuals. And so they talk about that. Well, what skills are you afraid that you're not developing by using this, to be a little bit more intentional about it?
Okay, well, the last question from me, and then I will open it to all of you, is that some of you, and Mary Beth started in terms of some of the challenges and some of the issues that they come. But also, I also want to ask, our panel as well, is that what do the students understand, and what we understand this as an educators with the term of AI? We throw out a number of different things: generative AI, or agentic AI, or LLMs, or other kind of forms of AI, and sometimes we put them all together. So. And we just call basically computer and AI, which could be, right? I mean, that's pretty much not a bad idea. And I will start with Mary Beth because she started this, but the rest of the panelists touched that. Is that what are some of the challenges and that you see, and how much we understand, and how much the students understand what an AI is, like ChatGPT, versus something else, and how much trust they get from that, and how much trust you want them to get from this kind of things, but also what are the challenges that you see that they are coming. De-skilling is one of the things. So can you?
Yeah, the skill atrophy, certainly. And I think from the student standpoint, especially young students, it's not atrophy, it's just not learning. So it's this dependence. But I feel one of the biggest challenges I see is the speed at which this is happening that makes it hard. Even at the university level, the messaging keeps getting updated and changed and confusing and different from different areas, and then sometimes none at all, and then you are getting it from all these different avenues. It seems like it's everywhere. But then what are skills that are good to offload to AI or administrative tasks? But then what isn't as good because now your skills are atrophying, like coding atrophy, for example. So this is something I'm thinking about in terms of my own research, but it's also really helpful. And so I think that dependence is certainly coming along. And we heard this at another iDisc event that I thought was a great quote, which is that the Industrial Revolution automated our bodies, our muscles, and the AI revolution is automating our minds. And in the same way, we still need to do exercise. We still have to be active. And so even though that automation came around, it shouldn't replace completely. And I see that in a similar way that we should be thinking about at all levels. I think something that's really important that we should be thinking about teaching is prompt engineering, using it as a tool. What are the right questions to ask? What are you comfortable asking? Safety concerns, privacy concerns. These are things that I think should be taught, but how can we teach it if the teachers are also learning in real time. And so I think slowing down, having panel discussions about this, to really be thinking about how we're moving forward instead of constantly feel like we're playing catch up is really important, because the students feel that too if we're constantly feeling that. And so that's not an answer by any means, but I think like banning AI, I think is not a real solution forward. And so instead, how can we retain what is deeply human, what is the important connections? I'm always thinking about the environmental factor. How can we use these tools while mitigating the, giant harms it's doing to the environment as well? All of those things as part of the discussion.
Clay, so can you elaborate a little bit from your experience about, how much we should trust AI and how much we should tell the students to trust AI?
Yeah. So this is just coming to me now. Like, you all are sparking things, and I want to say something provocative because I like doing that. I think AI has the potential to be the death of curiosity, right? And I'll track back and talk about Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is also something that got everybody's feathers ruffled in academia, right? And I talk about this in one of my classes, where we just talk about Wikipedia as like a collaborative platform, right? Where knowledge is created by a community. And it's surprising how many, like the typical student reflection on that, they mention, one, that when they were in grade school, they were not allowed to use Wikipedia as a source. It's like, you do not do that. And they don't necessarily know why they weren't allowed to, other than like it's potentially bad information. Like they didn't really understand like the media literacy components of it. Just like don't do that. Like smoking's bad. Don't do it. And then there's this other like discovery though that happens because I have them edit a Wikipedia article, or I have them create a Wikipedia article, and it's like, wait, hold up. Actual humans made this knowledge, and it's a living document. Like, oh, and that's like I didn't know that, right? And we treat Google the same way. We ask it for a thing, and we expect it to give us like exactly what we want. And sadly, I think with AI, a lot of people approach it for like a give me the answer, and like ChatGPT is so long-winded, right? You ask it something and it's like, hold on, let me just write an essay for you. And like, but so like me, when I do that, I'm like, yeah, baby, like let's read this essay, and I'm like, oh, because it's like sparking ideas, and I'm trying to like engage with it. But I think for a lot of like students, and probably a lot of other people too, it's like their eyes glaze over, and it's like, I don't want to read this. Like, just give me the answer. Like, give me like the little soundbite, right? And that's dangerous. That's really, really dangerous.
Ben.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. So I feel like I'm going to sidestep the question, and I'm going to answer the question I want to answer, which is, so what does it mean? And I teach, I teach design thinking classes. I teach writing classes. We have students who, we teach students to write around 20 students per class. That's a luxury, because I know not everybody gets that opportunity. But why do students come to college? And I think they come to college to build relationships with faculty and to talk to them about their ideas. And I think that what's dangerous is AI getting in the way of that, and faculty letting AI get in the way of that. I assume that the reason they come to the University of Miami is they want to meet all these amazingly smart people that are all around us and talk to them and get excited and have a fire sparked. We're launching people out into the world. And so whatever we're doing with AI should assist in that primary mission. It shouldn't push us farther away from it. And I think in the classroom implementations where that is happening, students know. Students know that. They can feel that. They can see that. And I think in the spaces where we're playing together and we're trying to figure it out together, they can see that because we're there with them the whole time. we can't just say, well, you're on your own, which I think means we have to teach it. At the same time as I also say, well, we also have to go, well, that didn't work, and all of us become a little bit more comfortable with watching failure, productive failure, around us in ways that makes it okay for us to play and makes it okay for students to experiment and say, this application I'm comfortable with, but this application I'm not, because there's never going to be a uniform approach for all students. They're all going to have various levels of how they want to interact with it, in my experience, in my opinion.
Great. And Wan Lee, I mean, you can answer any question that you want. I mean, Ben started that, so but you will
Sorry.
get 5 points less, by the way. But I mean, can you tell us a little bit, and you know, because you are also having the experience of also high schoolers and so forth in a very difficult topic, and how you think that, you know, the approach has to be different, right? Or what they can do with kind of technologies like that. And I understand that you are not just using ChatGPT to answer a question, right? Yeah. Here's my math problem, the answer is 50. Right? I mean, but can you tell us a little bit of some of the challenges that you have faced, you know, with this kind of approach?
Yeah, I mean, like K-12 is a totally different, like, you know, space compared with college, right? Because K-12, essentially, if I take an exam, they just forbidden you using it, as you suggested, right? They would just like cut the question and paste it into ChatGPT, and they get an answer. So that's like K-12, I think is quite a bit different. But in terms like, you know, whether high schoolers or like, you know, the college students, where they are transitioning to university, I think, you know, one important thing we're talking about, like, you know, training for skills. I think I just read an article from like, you know, Georgetown Center for Education and Workforce Development. I think the main thing is about like, should be like, you know, professional level adaptation, rather than, you know, we're focusing on one skill set. You need to learn coding, you need to learn this or that. I think we should focus on like, you know, occupation specific skill sets. And more importantly, we also discussed briefly about this, is, you know, we should better connect it with industry and with partnerships beyond like, you know, just disseminating knowledge or information to the students, right? Because we are much more connected compared with before. And also like, you know, students, right, just like, you know, learn on their own or like within the totally in a confined environment. I think, you know, it just get much less like exposure to what happens in the real world. Class, we don't know what we are getting into. Things are happening just too fast. We don't know the profession will still be exist, or like what's going to be look like the next 5 or 10 years. So I think, you know, overall, you know, just get more connected with the actual world out there will be like, you know, playing a much bigger role in the future higher education.
Great.
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes for questions. I see a lot of hands. Kim, I saw Kim first, and then we'll go to Justin.
So in the context of reskilling and also being able to do more things with AI, how do we adjust our expectations for, I mean, what to expect from our students?
More.
And I will ask what we actually adjust our expectations for ourselves.
More.
More is better.
I'm gonna answer that with presence. You know, like asking students to be present is I think key to that. But you know, I think the pivot that educators, in some ways, I mean, nobody has all the answers, but I think one of the things that I've been focusing more on is just more metacognitive conversations and engagement. So this was your goal. Did you hit that mark? Why did you not hit that mark? What got in the way? And oftentimes, especially because I teach a lot of team-based classes, one of the biggest reasons for that is I wasn't able to be present. What was keeping you from being present? You know, was it the tools? Was it your phone? Was it the time? Were you hungry? And so I think for me, I find that difficult too. And so I think presence is kind of key. That would be an expectation. So it's a big gift. I always tell student teams the biggest gift you can give each other is each other's presence, because it's the hardest thing to cultivate in in a world where our attention's being pulled 100 different directions.
I mean, like to me, even though we have AI and AI will be part of, likely will to be part of the, future workforce essential skill or mindset at least in the foreseeable future, right? I think, still like fundamental computing and coding skills, to me, like actually much more important compared with before, right? Let's say previous, maybe some majors or disciplines may not need like a understanding of computing and coding. But nowadays, I feel like, you may need to understand like much more of that so that, you can maximize the advantage or usage of AI. Otherwise, you may become lag behind, right? Prompt engineer, right, as you just mentioned, is probably one of the major skills if we talk about skills, or like the things we want to equip the students with. So essentially, I feel like, coding on a fundamental understanding of computing coding, or like, a mindset of like AI probably are more important than ever. Otherwise, you may feel like, lag behind of others.
And just to add on, because I actually liked all three answers, is I think that as teachers that we need to be good role models in using these tools. And so what we expect should be what we show. So transparency, how did we use it? If we don't want students to use it for a certain task, then we shouldn't be using it. Or maybe then it should be a chance, and I'm speaking from experience of my own, thinking like, maybe it's a time to step back and be like, how are we using this to learn X, Y, Z? I also think as a researcher, that piece is very much there as well. So transparency, honesty, in terms of a role model in our own usage and our limitations of knowledge. And how I'm learning this as we are all going too. So yeah, that's another piece of that I see.
I would just clarify mine a little bit. When I said more, I mean just expect more, but also temper that with patience, right? Like, you now have the tools to do some amazing work that you would never be able to do, right? Like creative code, like there's things that are just, it's beyond my reach, except now they are. But you have to be really patient, and you have to study it, and you have to be willing to say like, no, I'm expecting more of myself, of this thing, so it's okay if it's gonna take me longer to do this.
On that note, can I ask about the impact of AI on creativity, especially since you guys are dealing with design and writing? Is all the writing kind of blending into one style, or do you still see your students coming up with new things, like truly original things?
That's a great question, and I'm so glad to have colleagues from the Department of Writing Studies here with me who could also answer that. I think we're experiencing the largest disruption in our field maybe ever. Computers and social media were once predicted to be the death of writing. For a long time, Wikipedia certainly was one that freaked us all out a bit, but AI is really difficult. And so I think the challenge that we face is a challenge that writing is just one thing you have to learn in the university. And so even if you want to learn that, even if you're deeply invested in it and you have a test or 3 tests and 4 other things and you work a full-time job, no matter what your life looks like, it makes it really, really easy to just go, but I could go there and just ask it to do this task for me. And I understand it. We brought in a colleague of mine a couple of years ago to talk about AI, and his opening joke was, if all of you academics could just feed your CV to ChatGPT and have it write your annual review, would you do it? And everybody laughed. Because in a lot of ways we would say, well, yes. And so sometimes I think for students that's what it feels like, is to just say, I'm going to go ahead and do that. That being said, I think we're constantly working with and trying to figure out ways to get students back into the driver's seat with that. And so in the department, we're working on sort of a critical humanist rationale for how you think about incorporating AI into a writing practice. and process that, allows the student to remain in control of their ideas. And so there isn't a simple solution to it, but we're working on it. We're working on it. So do I think that students are becoming less creative? I think students don't want to become less creative. But I think that the realities of the world sometimes force people to do things they don't necessarily want to do just so that they can get everything done. And I think that's true for everyone, not just students.
I also think that we need to stop thinking about technology as positive, right? Like, so many people just think technology, good, and it's not. It's neutral, right? There's negatives and there's positives. I would just throw this out there as a alternate future or alternate reality. If generative AI was developed before video, and when reading and writing were like something that you really studied, it would be profound because people would critically engage way more because they were able to read and comprehend ideas because of reading and writing. Because reading and writing is like probably the most important skill for critical thinking that humans have, right? And we've been adapting to like technology that's taken a lot of that away from us, and so we're losing that ability to look critically at things. But if we look at technology critically, we're going to be fine, right? But if we don't, we're screwed.
I just have the microphone here.
Okay, you have the microphone, okay.
How are you guys looking at helping students maintain their soft skills, like the skills they would learn through study groups, working on problems together, or other sort of collaborative activities they would have as part of their undergraduate and graduate educations, now that they can basically, if they don't know the answer to something, they can just look it up, versus like asking their friend, like, hey, did you get this problem, or how would you solve this problem? Those types of interactions.
I'll go because in my classes it's usually like a project based, so it's never like you just work on it on your own, whether you're with AI or something. But I always place like a student in your group. They can be like a partner, or AI can be an additional partner or support, because I encourage them to actually using AI because their product will be better. Most times will be better, will be more like I don't call it creative in education, but at least it's more effective, right? Think about the AI agents they created before the ChatGPT, and think about agents they are capable of creating it now, right? To support like teaching and learning, it's just like a totally different. They still got like collaborate with their teammates. I don't see there's huge change. Okay, I don't need to work with my peers anymore. At least in my course, we don't have. We still have like students working as groups with the AI support, right? It's just a different dynamic, but overall, I feel like it's just making the whole course, like all their projects or their products or their prototypes are just like much better compared with before. They can still get most of the soft skills they can get from my perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have been doing a lot of classwork in the classroom. So like team, what's the phrase? Something like pair and share.
Yeah.
That way it's like creating, and your classes sound like they're like designed around that.
Yeah.
So even in a math-based class, having that space. But I think that that's a really good question, because I've been thinking about it. Students are constantly surrounded by other students and have more of this interaction. But I'm thinking even at the higher up level, maybe it's easier, faster, to just look it up instead of talking to someone else. So I actually think that that's really important at all levels. And so fostering it at the student level, creating the space for them to talk to each other, to talk to you, and so that way it's not easier to offload, but as, our jobs become more isolated, to make sure that we also aren't losing that.
The only thing I'll add to that discussion is just simply, I think giving students the opportunities to work in teams, but then to like teach them how to do it. Ask them, give them, so like I take agile project management principles and I adapt them to the team environment. So they do these like sprints of work together, and then at the end of the sprint they follow what an agile team might do, which is they do a process improvement. So they don't talk about each other, they talk about how they're working together. And so they spend some time going, you know, it worked well is this, but what didn't work well is this. And then I teach them these, different ways of going about doing it. And then they individually reflect on how that went. Are they being honest with each other? And so they get comfortable talking to each other about how things are going without saying, well, so-and-so just never does their work. Right? It's like, well, we all need to follow through with what we're doing, and what's getting in the way of that? Well, and then somebody during that conversation might be like, yeah, I got really distracted last week because something else happened, so, I really need to do this. And so at the end of this, it's a chance before the end of the semester for them to sort of recommit. So I think just like a good project manager has to make time in a project to talk about how the project is going, I think teachers also have to make time in group projects to talk about how that project is going with the team and to facilitate it.
Yeah, one more question. Last question. Last question. The rest of them, I think, maybe one more. One more question.
I don't have a question. I have a short thing.
Okay.
My question for the panel is, as a technologist, because it seems like we keep fighting technology, what do you guys want from AI?
I'll answer that fast.
Yeah.
I want it to help me be more present. So I talked about presence before, and I have a friend who showed me how he's been using AI. He is a note taker, and it was a really simple thing, but it kind of reframed it for me. In his meetings, he no longer has to worry about writing stuff down. He just has to worry about being there because the technology is capturing things for him. And he's like, and it actually makes me more intentional in the meetings. He showed me the app, and there was multiple ways that it captured information so to make sure that it was right, that it was accurate. That I really like because, again, I feel like we live in a world where our attention gets distributed, and so in those moments where you can actually focus in and be with somebody in the moment, feels excruciatingly rare if your phone is telling you got to go pick up your kids and you got, it's like all these things are around you, but that is something I really want out of technology, is the ability for it to help me actually like focus in on the thing that's going on in front of me. I can find it. I'm going to look at my email though, so I'm not bored, I promise you.
Question, comment?
I just wanted to say hi. I'm April. I'm the director of the Writing Center, and we've had a faculty working group for the past 6 semesters where faculty meet online and talk about these things that we're all trying to work on. This semester we had faculty from the medical school, the nursing school, the School of Architecture, Business, and College of Arts and Sciences, and we're meeting every other week to just talk about this stuff. So if you were interested in talking to other faculty who are trying to figure out how to incorporate AI and help students learn and engage, we're also doing that, and you could let me know, or maybe you could let Ben know, or email the Writing Center, and we would be happy to let you know when the next group is starting again in the fall. We just met for the last time this Wednesday for this semester.
Great. Yes. By all means, thank you very much, and thank you, the panelists.
Thank you.